Paul. It's Paul. It's Paul. Fuck it. It's Paul. Listen. There's only so much I can explain. It's Paul. Listen. I just gotta be honest with you. Paul. I just gotta be honest with you. Paul. You gotta be fucking kidding me.
Ladies and gentlemen, on the podcast today on Paul Pod, we have none other than the notorious, glorious, laborious Adam Blackstone. Adam Blackstone is, one of the unsung heroes in Eminem's career, in the sense that a lot of people, don't necessarily know you by face or name, but they've seen you and they're familiar with you, but they might not know, what your name is or exactly what you do. I mean, obviously they see you on stage playing an instrument, and obviously they know somebody's responsible for the sounds coming out of the speaker and the band that's playing along with M when he performs, but what they don't know is that man is you. So, Adam Blackstone, official title is music director, but I will go on the record here and say one of the most important people in Eminem's career, specifically in the modern era, because we're talking about Curtain Call 2, which is the greatest hits compilation of songs from the album Relapse forward. And that's exactly where you start.
That's where I started, for sure.
Right.
For sure.
So going back in history, doing my research, talking about and thinking about what we're going to talk about today, I thought about where did we start working with you and why, right? So we know where, but I'm going to get to the why now. Do you remember the Kanye West Glow in the Dark tour?
Do I?
Yes.
Oh, yes. I would. That's one I would never forget. It prepared me for adult music life.
Right. So that's my first experience with you, right?
Okay.
And I was in the audience in Madison Square Garden, and I was watching the show, and I was particularly struck by the fact that there was a band. We didn't see the band, right? Because the band was hidden from the audience, but I knew there was a band because I could hear it. And I was particularly struck by how well the band was integrated in with Kanye's music. And by that, I mean, there's an art to this, right? And particularly when it comes to hip hop, because so much of it is sort of in the can, in the box, from a drum machine, from a sampler, not necessarily live. And in order to recreate that sound, but in a live sense, but give it the integrity that the recording has, it requires a certain touch.
For sure.
Right? And there's a talent involved in creating that touch. So what I heard on that tour was impressive.
Thank you, brother.
Yes, absolutely. So I went to the guy that was the production manager on the tour, which happened to be our production manager, right?
Right. Yeah.
So I went to Curtis and I said, Curtis, who's doing Kanye's band? And he said, oh, yeah, it's this guy, Adam Blackstone. And I said, oh, okay. Well, I need to file that in my head and remember this guy, Adam Blackstone, right?
Boop.
Right. So cut forward to the next time that I have to deal with a band, I think, and I'm recreating this in sort of, thinking about what we did and what the sequence was.
Right.
And I go to, in my head, the DJ Hero performance with Eminem and Jay-Z in Los Angeles. Right? So there was a game called DJ Hero. There was a Renegade edition of that game that Eminem and Jay-Z were the sort of marketers for, and they put their music in, right? So it was an Eminem and Jay-Z edition of the game.
Okay.
And there was a live performance in LA for Activision for DJ Hero, right?
Yep.
So we had to do a performance with a band. And when we did that, it was just a few songs. It wasn't a full performance. Marshall liked the experience, right? And he was like, I think maybe we should try this. Maybe we should do more with the band.
Yeah.
Okay. So now I know I'm doing a lot of talking, but I'm trying to set this all up. So then this was like summer of 2009.
Yeah.
And then in fall of 2009, the first time we officially worked with you was the Voodoo Fest in New Orleans, which is around Halloween. So tell me about the experience first working with Marshall on creating a live show with the band.
Well, I must say, I cannot start this without saying that Questlove, who I consider my MD, my forever MD, called me and said, I'm giving Paul Rosenberg your phone number between Questlove and Sean G, right? And I was like, let me Twitter to Bunyan? You give him, that's who you give him my number?
That's me. Yeah.
And I said, cool. He said, M might hit you or Paul might hit you. I was like, cool.
Right. Because we were looking for a band. And I think that what I did was somebody connected me with Sean, maybe with Rich also.
Yep. Absolutely.
And because, when you're looking for a band, you look no further than in hip hop than the Roots, right?
For sure.
I mean, they are the gold standard for anything live in hip hop. Nobody's ever done it better, and that's the guys you go to, right?
That's it. And so me being a descendant, real quick backstory, I moved to Philly in 2000, went to school, University of Arts, was a studio rat. And what I mean by that is I just sat there. I just sat and watched James Poyser, Amir, Rich Nichols, Sean G just walk in and out of the studio with Erykah Badu, Jill Scott, Black Thought, Dice Raw, Common,
Rozelle.
And so Rozelle, Hub,
Malik
rest
B.
in peace, Malik, for sure.
Right.
It's just, and so when my turn was called, because it was like Rich needed some bass on
Scott
something.
Storch.
I wasn't around. I was post Scott Storch.
Okay,
Scott was already with 50 and Tim-ish.
Right.
You know what
okay.
I'm
So
saying?
this is a little later.
This is a little later. Like, when did Lean Back come out? I know we skipping, but when was that?
Jeez, maybe 07, 08, I'm guessing.
Okay, got so he was already like leaning toward that. You know what I'm saying? So anyway, my turn was called and the Roots put me on, period. That's the very short end of it. And
2004. 2004 was Lean Back.
So I was a studio rat in 02, 03. So he was already, doing Crimea River with Timbaland and a bunch of 50 Cent records under Dre.
Sure.
And when he branched out into
DRE.
He was Scott was gone. So, so there was a new regime, myself, Omar Edwards, a bunch of the Philly guys that was kind of coming up through this open mic kind of scene called the 5 Spot Black Lily. And my first big gig was Jay-Z's farewell concert, 2003, Fade to Black.
Right.
I'm saying all that to say, fast forward to when we did JM, it just all came full circle and kind of came together. We did Renegade, whatever, right? When we got the call to do, were
you part of that band that we did?
Yeah, we were called the Illadelphonics.
So you did that show?
I did that. That was my first big gig.
And you were just playing bass, and was Omar? Omar was the music director?
No.
Who was?
Questlove was the music director.
For that, Questlove was. Okay.
Yeah, and he played drums.
So that makes even more sense. So then I probably went to Quest and I said, hey, we need a band. They just did this performance with us, and obviously we couldn't bring the Roots out. And he was like, I got an idea for you, connected me with you. And I was like, that's the guy from the Glow in the Dark tour.
Exactly.
So I had already had that filed away, and that's how we reconnected. Okay, got it.
Yes, sir. And I got Glow in the Dark. I'm just connecting it all through Fade to Black. I met this kid in a pink polo. He's like, yo, come work with me. I'm gonna be the greatest of all time.
Yeah. Well, listen, that was definitely a fortuitous meeting, and you really crushed it with that. So let's get into that, because we had done a live performance with the Roots prior to that. We did Lose Yourself at the Grammys with the Roots band, and it was awesome. And like I said, there's an art to it, right? So it's not just about playing with the right drummer, playing with the right guitar player, bass player, etc., you have to really, really understand hip hop.
There's a synergy in the hip hop and the live aspect, because at the end of the day, we are trying to recreate the feeling that the MC got when he heard that beat.
Right.
You know what I'm saying? I'm not trying to replace it. If anything, I'm enhancing it for the live experience, but I'm also never trying to take away from the feeling that, whoever I'm working with, in this case, Marshall Mathers, got when he heard that beat, what inspired him. And so I want to always have the integrity to remain true to the track. Now, when it calls for it and it's like, hey, we're going to add 8 bars here for an outro, or we need a transition. One of the things I've built my career on is having these seamless shows. I really hate dead space, and I'm really excited that when we met, you all did too.
Yeah.
I look at my shows as a movie. I'm scoring it from top to bottom. You know what I mean? We're telling a story, sometimes chronologically, sometimes lyrically, sometimes, a lot of times musically.
Right.
You know what I'm saying? And so even, Paul, I'll sit down with you, and when N comes in, I'll say, hey, I moved this around because this key or this tempo goes better with this, and it's a more seamless transition.
Yeah.
Or let's put this here because the intro to this is going to give him a breather.
Yep. That's another part to it, right? So there's the sonics,
and
the way that you recreate it, but then there's a whole nother art to it that you are masterful at, if you don't mind me saying. That is creating the sort of transitions, right? Yeah. The sequence of the songs and the set list, right?
Set list is everything.
Set list is so important. So
everything.
So the first thing when you're creating the sound, right, and you want to get it to sound like the record, but what I say and how I describe it is it makes these records 3-dimensional, right? It takes this sort of flat stereo sound that you're used to hearing, and when you go to a concert, it gives you a 3D image of that song, if done right.
Oh yeah.
And I think that you do it more than right. And I'm not going to tell the audience or anybody what the tricks are. I know some of them now because I've learned them from you, but there's an art to that. And then on top of that, right, you've got to make sure that the songs interlace with one another and connect with one another. And I think, we haven't talked about this a lot, but knowing some of your background, I think this is where your church background comes into play, right? Yeah. To an extent. And tell me how you think that is the case, because when I hear some of it, it seems like not church in the sense that it sounds like that kind of music, but that kind of feeling, right?
I was just about to say, so, at times, church musician or church, the analogy of it can seem like a little bit stale, but in what you're talking about, for sure, it's the spirit. It's the soul. It's the soul.
Absolutely.
In the music. It's to stay in the spirit or to stay on a high. And how we do that, and how I've learned to do that, is by seamlessly going from song to song, so that feeling that you got as a listener, as an audience member.
Yep.
When we transition to your next favorite song, it goes right into it, and then you just keeps elevating. You know what I mean? And,
energy, the building of the energy,
it's
and
the building
elevation
of the energy
and the spirit and all of it. Yeah.
And so when we have a person like Marshall Mathers, who, number one, has the most incredible verses on even some B-side records, right?
Yeah.
It's easy for me to be like, yo, when we go straight to this verse, I just want you to start rapping right away. Because normally as well, I'm telling a story, tempo-wise, sonically, whatever, but it's like the spirit of where he's coming from, whether it be him, doing the voice changes, or if we're in a song like Stan and it's a more serious thing, and then it's like we're going to also surround that with those same type of moments. And so that's where the church thing could come in, because when you're in the moment in a church atmosphere, you don't just go off and just start playing a shout in church if you're worshiping. It's a chord thing. It's a sonic palette. It's a feeling that you get. And definitely church has helped me and a lot of other people just remain in that moment. You know what I'm saying? So like for me, when I'm looking at our set list, what keeps me in the moment until we want to hit them with a big break, and it's a purposeful break, or it's a purposeful downtime, or it's a purposeful ending to a song, so that we just came from this one movement that gave you this spirit for the last 13 minutes.
Yeah, and when you're putting the set together, what I've noticed is you're almost creating these blocks, right? And these segments of songs that work together that you can almost interchange in different set lists, right? So there may be a 2, 3, or 4 song set that's connected together that if you decide, you know what, maybe we should move this down here, the whole piece can move. And then you can put something else in its place. So, but not only do you do the transitions, but you also build intros and outros, right? And for the various tours, you've built different intros musically, which sort of build into like an energy and a crescendo that transitions into the first track, right?
Absolutely.
So how do you go about that?
Marshall has been instrumental in some of that as well because of how his records start, Paul. If you think about him having some skit things, you know what I'm saying? You think about him having these
I know about skits.
You think about him having these very famous chords at the top of a song, or like, one of the Marshall things is like, we start with no drums and we build the feeling, you know what I'm saying? Mm-hmm. So then what I do is I look at that as he scored those 4 bars. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to build an extension of 16 on top of that. So how do I get into his 4 that takes us to the feeling?
Right.
And song selection for the first song and song selection for the last song is a big part of that as well.
Sure.
Because we already know if we're doing a festival or if we're doing something super crazy, Rock in Rio, or we're doing, overseas, it's like people are going to scream. So what I've learned from Marshall and from the Eminem gig, I should say, sometimes you don't waste a super duper hit at the top because they are just so excited to see him. Mm-hmm. So I do on the set list.
Yeah, they're screaming over it, right?
They're screaming over it.
It's almost like it's a waste if you give away one of the big hits out of the gate.
I've learned that from the Eminem gig, straight up and down. I don't mind saying that. It's like, and I've taken that to everywhere. I've taken that to the countryside. I've taken that to the pop side. I'm like, yo, they are just going to be so happy to see this person.
Save the energy.
Let's save the record. And I actually, Paul, just go for energy. Mm-hmm. So what are those energy records?
Yeah, save the energy from the hit, I'm saying.
Exactly.
For when you need it later down in the set.
Because you're going to need it. You're going to need it.
And we already knew that. We had learned that and been doing that for a while. We'd known to build towards it for sure.
And so, like, one of my favorite intros that I built was us doing Monster Tour with Rhea M. And I did this crazy mashup of worlds. And what that did for the listener was I'm about to take you on this real crazy, trippy, you never thought this Barbadian woman and this Detroit dude would come together and really have a set together that makes sense.
Yeah.
And I think we killed that tour so hard.
Oh yeah, we sure
based
did.
Based off of having our music integrated on the pop side, and then the pop side integrated on our beats, on the Eminem beats.
Yeah. Well, that's some of the magic I think that works for those two. But before we get into that, I want to talk to you also not just about the gigs, right, and the concerts, but also the sort of the important TV performances.
Man, yeah.
Because there's a whole nother art to that. So now you can dust your shoulder off a little bit. Emmy nominated Adam Blackstone, right? Music director for the Super Bowl performance that we just did this past February with Dr. Dre and Snoop Dogg and Mary J. Blige and 50 Cent and Kendrick Lamar and Eminem. Leading up to that, which is, one of the biggest moments of, for all of us as far as live TV goes, we've done some other things, right? We've done multiple award shows. We did
SNLs.
Plenty of SNLs. We did the Oscars. right? We lose yourself
Oscars
at the
epic.
Oscars,
Oh, yeah.
surprise performance. So when you're preparing for one of those performances on television, it's different, right? Because
Very.
you're thinking about different things. You're not just thinking about the people in the room, right? But you're thinking about what's the experience going to be like for people at home, and how is this going to sound differently on somebody's TV speakers as opposed to, these giant monitors at a stadium, right? So it's a whole different vibe.
Whole different vibe. Yeah. And for me, I pride myself on the mix, specifically a live band mix.
Right.
You know what I'm saying? Paul, I will shut the whole thing down and go listen to our mix to make sure not just that the band is right, but to make sure Eminem's vocal is sitting right as well. And we've won. You know what I mean? Like, I think that
and
it happens
most times. There's been times where we haven't, right? And it's out of our control. And
out of our control.
That's those times where there's I'm not going to say any names or blow anybody up, but there's certain situations where they have their own engineers that are union. Nobody else can touch the board, and they're
not hip hop heads.
Well, not only that, but you're stuck with what they do, and a lot of them aren't going to listen to you, right? You could be in the room telling them, turn this up, turn this up, turn this up, turn this down, and they just are like, I'm doing my job. This sounds fine to me. Right.
Yep.
So
totally objective.
Yeah, and that's happened to us in the past. But for the most part, it's been great, and we have a great working relationship with those types of engineers. So when
a lot of that comes from too is like, specifically, and I'm very thankful for this, but me building my credibility in their minds and in their wheelhouse as well, because they're like, now we trust Adam when he says turn up the drum track or turn up the live kick or something like that, because I'm always delivering excellence. And when we prepare like no other. Me and you talk about that offline kind of all the time. You know what I'm saying? Yeah. It's like practice does not make perfect, but practice makes it easy for us. The amount of times that we do it when we hit that stage is just like another run through for us. Yeah. And nobody prepares like me. Nobody prepares like him. We really, really care about what we do. We want to make the experience for the viewer, not just in the audience, but at home, like you said, a big deal. And so for me, it starts with that mix. It starts with us getting the band tight specifically for television. And then me conveying to you guys, here's how hard we're going to smack it. I changed this bar. I changed that bar just for him to have a drop and have something impactful, because a lot of times on the television side of it, there's viewers that are going to not start out as Eminem fans. And then at the end of that 5 minute, 10 minute, whatever thing that we doing, they're like, oh, this dude is really, the whole package is just the best.
Yeah. You're saying like somebody might not have been necessarily an Eminem fan, but just based on his music, but they see the performance and they're like, wow, okay, I get this, or this was really good.
Yeah. Or this is really good. Let me figure out why he just was head over heels above everybody. You know what I'm saying? So I pride myself on making that experience specifically for the viewer. I said this before. I got in trouble one time, but it's like, I'm not really concerned on television with those people in that stadium. Like, I really am thinking about the 8 million viewers. Yeah. You know what I'm saying?
Well, the bigger the show, the more you have to be concerned about that, right? Because that audience just sort of dwarfs however many people are in that arena or stadium, or when it comes to an award show, it's literally a theater, right? So there's maybe a couple thousand people in there, as opposed to the hundreds of thousands of people or millions of people that are watching it at home. So
it's and like the people in the theater are actually peers and music fans as well. So sometimes that is a bad judgment too, as far as like, did it come off?
Yeah, you know or they get what you're doing anyway, so you don't really need to explain it to them. They understand what you're doing. So those first 10 rows or whatever it is of the award show is all people.
The award rows.
They do it too. When it comes to, this is the sort of ultimate, right? Because award shows are great. The Grammys we've done multiple times. We've done SNL, as you mentioned, multiple times. We did the Oscars, late night TVs, stuff in Europe, right? But when it really boils down to it, this sort of pinnacle of live television and live performance when it comes to music is the Super Bowl, right?
It's nothing bigger. Yeah, man.
So make no mistake about it. When it comes to rehearsal, we rehearse the shit out of that Super Bowl. Like, I don't think we've ever rehearsed anything that much, and for good reason. There was, literally hundreds of people just on the floor performing with us, right? With the dancers and the extras, etc. And then there's all the moving parts with the set, with the lights, with you guys, with the various performers, and it was really, really a lot to come together and pull off. So I think, for a second, I want to talk about that challenge. And when you first got the call about doing this, what ran through your mind, and who were you talking to, and what was that experience like?
Yeah, when I first got the call, so we had just come off of J-Lo, Shakira, right? I was blessed to be the MD of that. And then the next year, Jesse Collins took over, and it was The Weeknd. I talked to Jay-Z probably March.
Right.
So Super Bowl's February. I said, I got a genius idea.
And this was after the Tampa Super Bowl with The Weeknd.
Yes.
Okay.
I said, I have a genius idea. We're in LA next year. Dr. Dre, he said, yo, you late. We working on it.
Yeah, like, they had started talking about that about a year prior, I think. They knew that the Super Bowl was coming to LA, and there was conversations about like, this has to be Dre's Super Bowl, and I think that was like a couple years prior. But
yeah, and so he had not confirmed until September, though.
The year before. September before.
September before. So
that's right.
The following September that I'm talking about, from talking to Jay in March, I got the official call in October, and we went right to work. But one of the challenges that people really don't understand, I don't think they do, is those 5 artists that we had up there, 6. They could really do this 12 minutes, 13 minutes on their own. Straight up.
Yeah. Easily.
Drake could do this by himself.
Sure.
Snoop could have did this by himself. Marshall,
absolutely.
50, Mary J, Kendrick.
Yes, absolutely.
Anderson, with all the success he's had with Sonic right now, it's like they could have done this 12 minutes and 30 seconds alone.
And might end up doing it by themselves one day. But wait 1 second. So Dre calls you, right?
Yeah.
And you had worked with Dre prior.
For sure. Yep. I met Dr. Dre through Eminem.
Right. And you put together Dre's set for Coachella.
And I put together Dre's set for Coachella in 2012. Right. So full circle, 10 years later.
Right.
We had done some things in between there and worked in the studio even on some records. But like full circle, 10 years later, here we are, 2022 Super Bowl, right?
Yep.
And he then told me, once he called me, and I said I'm in before I had heard everything, because that's the relationship that we all have. Paul calls, Dre calls. It's like, I got you. I'm in. He said, but I want to do it with the family. And I was like, what? Who's the family?
Yep.
And he said, Snoop, Mary, Kendrick, M.
Yep.
At that time, it was actually, I didn't know about 50. I'm gonna be honest with you.
Well, that came to be a little bit later on.
Yeah. So in my head, I'm like, damn, I know I have 12 minutes and 30. If I can push Rock Nation and NFL to give me another minute, 13:30 max, right? And I'm like, and I'm a fan. I've neglected to say I am a fan of hip hop. I am a student of music in general, but I'm a fan of hip hop, especially, 90s, early 2000s. It's like, that's my thing. So when you talk about Snoop, you talk about Dre, it's like me hearing G-Thing, sneaking to listen to G-Thing and Doggy Style in my parents' house. I was like, had to listen in little dollar store earphones because I wasn't supposed to even be listening to that.
Sure.
I had no idea where Inglewood was. Growing up in New Jersey, I had no idea where.
Well, there was Inglewood, New Jersey, but it's not the same Inglewood.
Like, they're not in Inglewood, New Jersey.
Oh, no.
You know what I'm saying? And so full circle moment for me, man. I just feel so blessed even thinking of and talking about it right now. I'm getting a little emotional. Like, I never thought when I bought Chronic that I would be in this situation 25.
No, it's a dream. It was the same thing for us, by the way. Like,
Yeah.
Marshall talks about it when he first went to meet Dre. It was like, am I really here? Like, he had to pinch himself, right? I mean, we all looked up to Dre, like, it doesn't get any greater
Yes.
in terms of the hip hop producer, and we've all been blessed to work with him. So you had worked with most of that cast of characters
For sure.
on the Coachella show, including a hologram of Tupac, even, right? And 50 was on that show as well.
Yep. Fifth was on that
so
show.
you'd work with Marshall, you'd work with Kendrick, you'd work with Snoop, you'd work with Dre. I'm sure
Yeah.
you'd work with Mary at some point.
I worked with Mary, yeah, because I'm also R&B to the core at times, and so and even her association with Puff and stuff like that. It's like, East Coast girl. It's like, I was able to work with her in the past as well. And one of my tasks right away was putting this band together. And I'm not trying to skip a step, Paul, but like, I had to incorporate in my head one person from each of those members, each of those artists' band, because the other thing that I do super well and try to continue to do is make each artist feel comfortable when they walk in.
Mm-hmm.
You know what I'm saying? And that is a different type of skill that has nothing to do with a chord or a bass or anything. It's like the trust factor from MD to artists and management as well has to be there for an artist to even trust that, I'm gonna walk in and stuff is just going to be right.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? There's nothing worse than an artist having to come in, listen to rehearsal, and then change the whole set. You know what I'm saying? Like, I've heard those stories. It hasn't happened to me, often or if at all. But like, I couldn't imagine like all the work that you put in as a MD, and then it's like you're not really taking the artist into consideration at times. And what I do best is be for the artist. So when those 5 people heard that it was me as the MD, everybody was just super cool. I'm really thankful about that because it made the process easier. They know, M knows that Adam got my back musically. You know what I'm saying? Whatever he decides to possibly do with this music, I'm all with it. And then I have the ability to, because of our relationship, explain to him what the rest of the show is doing to lead into his moment. You know what I mean?
Yeah, for sure. So when it comes to that, right, that's a different skill set, as you mentioned, and that's almost like a sort of management skill set, right? Because you're making the artist feel comfortable, and that's part of what we have to do as managers. So that's a different type of thing. But the experience of doing this job over and over again makes you realize what you need to do in order to have success, right?
Absolutely. And each experience is different too. I don't want to take for granted that I was with Dre and M in 2012 for Coachella. So I got it. I don't need to prepare. Like,
right.
No.
You don't want to assume anything with that.
No, you never assume. And also you're always striving to be better because the music is evolving. Technology is evolving, and then also the gigs are evolving. So it's like, even as great as Coachella was, it ain't the Super Bowl. You know what I'm saying? So it's like, Let's take that approach that this is one of the biggest stages, if not arguably the biggest stage. And how can we be better than what we were before?
Right.
And so that's always a task that I put on myself.
So how do you whittle down this? Like you said, each artist in their own right has a catalog that would justify them being the headliner of the Super Bowl halftime performance by themselves, right?
Yeah.
So you've got this ensemble, almost like an Avengers hip hop type of ensemble coming together. And you're tasked, as you mentioned, with putting together a medley of songs that are 13 and a half minutes long, including an intro and an outro, right? And you've got some of the biggest hits from these guys in modern history, right?
Yeah.
Each one of them in their own right has some of the hugest songs ever, right? In the Club, Lose Yourself, G-Thing, like the craziest, biggest records ever. So how do you decide what works? Because you know, even when it comes to Kendrick, there's a bunch of songs you can pick, and you've got to pick one, right? So some of it's easy, and I'll be honest, because the Eminem choice was kind of easy, right? It's that kind of environment. It's a stadium record. It's got the rock and roll energy. It's got feeling.
But hold on, before you say that,
Yeah.
I second guessed myself in the beginning on that choice. Let me tell you why. Because once the narrative was going to be Dr. Dre is the curator of everybody, and this is why we're all here, is because of Dre.
Yeah, I know what you're gonna say.
That ain't a Dre record.
He didn't produce it, right?
But
he's the spawn of Dre, so he did produce it in a sense, not directly, but he produced Eminem for the world.
What I'm saying though, in my head, I then said, how can I immediately directly correlate this to Dre? And what did I do? Tempo matched a couple of things, and I said, nowadays everybody want to talk, that they got something to say.
The
transition.
Right.
So it's
going
like
back to what we said before. Right.
Going back to what it's all stems from the feeling of the transition.
Right.
I want people to know that Dre spawned Eminem for sure. Yeah. Right. How can I make it so obvious and in your face, but still give you the record that's the stadium rock record? And that's what I did.
Yeah. And Forgot About Dre was also, we discussed that as well, because that is, you know, sort of a seminal record. And it's Eminem talking about Dr. Dre. Like, what else is more appropriate for the Dre set than that? But then you've got Lose Yourself, right?
But then you've got Lose Yourself.
So you worked both of those together. And what about the other choices? I mean, 50s was, you know, I think kind of obvious.
Like, pretty obvious. I think
because Dre produced it, right? And it was his biggest song. So, you know.
I mean, so in my head, I'm like, I gotta start with the next episode chords. Like, in my head, as soon as Dre called me, I'm like,
and that's how he used to open the concert on the Up in Smoke tour as well, with that record, because it just had that energy. Like,
it had a built-in
da 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 da. Like it feels like an introduction, right?
It does. It really does. But then I wrestle. You know, listen, I'm about to drop a nugget that nobody knows, but we were on
exclusive for the Paul Pod. Here we go.
We were on version 46.
Yep.
Before we walked onto that field. And those who know, I made a change the night before as well with that piano section.
Tell us.
And so, huh?
Can you tell us what it was?
Yeah, so there's a moment at the end of Lose Yourself where Dre always wanted to hop on the piano and kind of showcase some skills. So I had him playing Beethoven's Für Elise.
Okay.
Going into Still Dre. But
that's not what it ended up being.
And
that was in rehearsal, right? Because I remember that was in rehearsal. Right.
That was in every rehearsal.
For weeks.
Months.
Okay, months. Well, I wasn't there for all of them, but I was there for the weeks at SoFi.
Yeah. It was every rehearsal you were at. It was Beethoven.
Yeah.
About 2 days before, Drake calls me and was like, "Yo, man, I got this idea. Do you think you can make I Ain't Mad at You piano work before Still Dre?"
Because he wanted to have some Tupac in there.
And he wanted a little bit of a nod to Pac. It was a genius idea. The problem now was not that we couldn't play it in there, but it had, because of the rehearsal, it had to be the same exact timing.
Right.
So no other department was affected.
The exact same timing.
The exact same timing.
Right.
And that's where the challenge was for me, that I went to the studio and played it over and over and over again. Jesse Collins, the producer, said, "Are you really going to do this? Like, you're going to change?
Are you going to do this to me?"
Yeah. Like, you're going to change the music
the night before.
23 hours before. And I said, "Yeah, man, but it's trust me, it's a better idea."
I think the show was better for it, for sure. It had meaning, right? The Beethoven thing was cool, but it didn't have meaning. This had meaning and heart, and I think people connect with that. You know, connect with Tupac emotionally it very well, right?
Facts. And then I think too, to get a little deeper, is like the juxtaposition of coming from M to Pac to back to Dre and Snoop is like it's a whole moment where, musically it shows Dre's impact of generations. You know what
Right.
I'm saying? And then the other thing I struggle with, like if we're talking about set lists, right? I play nothing from the Chronic, which I
I
just talked about
know. I
how that
know.
album impacted me.
I
Right?
know. Right. So let's go back to that for a second, because
Yeah.
I think that's where some of the tougher choices lie in putting together this set list. I mean, there was the Kendrick choice, but I think from what I understand, like that's a record Dre wanted him to do. The We Gonna Be All Right, right? He felt like
Yeah.
that was a great record live, and he was obviously correct. But I think that when it came to the Dre and Snoop songs, there's certain records that I was like, well, how are they not gonna play? Like, for instance, how are they not going to play G Thing?
Yeah.
How's that not going to be on there? And tell me how you arrived at that conclusion, or was it just what Dre wanted to do?
No, it wasn't. It was timing. We knew we wanted to start with next episode.
Yep.
The NFL and the Rams play California Love every time they score.
And
So
it was the
like,
Super Bowl in LA in
and it was the Super
California.
Bowl
So
in
how
LA.
can you
So
not do that?
had to do California Love.
Right.
And then at that moment, where does G Thing fit into? Then, if you remember,
Just a
we
few
went
notes.
to.
Just a do 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 do
So
do
no,
do.
hold on. So if you gotta, so here's a nugget, another exclusive. If you hear at the beginning there's a part in the middle where we go back to right there in the middle of the next episode. I'm playing the keys if y'all can't see like this.
Yeah.
In the middle of that, I played the G Thing synth line. You got to go back. It's a little nugget in there. About 90 seconds into the Super Bowl, I said, but over top of the episode chords.
Then it was like, you're
and
a
so
tricky guy.
yeah, it was in there, man. Me and my programmer Derek Cobbs, he was like, "Yo, I got an idea." I said, "Yo, we got to do that." And going back to set list is like, right away we went to 50 after that, and went to Mary.
Yeah, how about Mary? How did that come about with the decision of songs? Because she's got a whole library herself.
Yeah, she has a whole library, a whole catalog, and so I'm a Mary fan, like I said, and I know live what works with Mary and what works on the record. So, Dr. Dre curating, we knew that it had to be a little bit of family affair,
Sure,
or at least
because Dre produced it. Yeah.
Dre produced it. That's one of her biggest records of all time for
Mhm.
sure. I think she still ends her set with like Family Affair and Just Fine. But I also know when I watch Mary and women, I was gonna say black women, but there's really women all over the world, watch Mary sing No More Drama.
Yeah.
That goes so hard in an
Powerful.
emotional and it's powerful
Yeah.
space. And Mary really represented the females in such a great way amongst all these powerful men. She held her own so much. So in my head, I'm like, what is that female record?
Yep.
Without us necessarily doing a ballad or I'm Going Down or Be Without You or something like that. What gives me the energy I'm looking for, but also speaks to a whole sector of people that are looking for
like
that
half of the
power.
population.
Yeah, like what speaks to half of our population about the strength of a woman.
Yeah.
And No More Drama was that for me. Now, me and her went back and forth a couple times, and then Jay hopped in, and it was like, man, the hood want to hear I'm Going Down. And I said, okay, let me try that and see what's up. But it definitely tempo-wise brought our show down a little bit based off of tempo only. It's
But
still
that's
a smash.
okay. That's okay, because that's the journey, right? And that's why you can't have peaks and valleys without ups and downs.
Facts,
right? So
for
so
sure.
you've got to start somewhere in order to get somewhere higher. And sometimes bringing it back down lets you take it up even higher the next time. Right?
Yeah, but that's why when Dre ultimately decided to stick with No More Drama, I had to make peaks and valleys within that song structure as well. So there's a bunch of moments where the drums come out and you hear like the cadence of the piano just playing by itself. There's moments where you just hear hits and it lets that beat breathe a little bit. So it's almost like she is singing a ballad, but it still has tempo.
Right.
And then knowing that I was going into Kendrick, I still had to do a continuous ramp up. So That Mary was probably set wise was probably the hardest because I wanted to almost try to do 2 songs in the allotted time that she had.
So Family Affair into No More Drama, then we go into Kendrick. But Kendrick,
Mad City.
it wasn't just, I was just going to say, it wasn't just We Gonna Be All Right. It was the Mad City record, right?
Yep.
So-
It was the Mad City, and that was a Fatima Robinson plug.
Well,
because
explain who Fatima is for those that don't know.
Okay, so for those who don't know, the Fatima Robinson is world-renowned choreographer, creative director, producer, and just all-around creative.
Yeah, and brought on as choreographer / creative producer for this performance as well. And so
Yeah.
so she's amazing, and she's a one word. You don't need Fatima's last name. You say Fatima and people know what you're talking about in the business, right? She's a one namer. So Fatima, how did she describe that to you that was the best route to go? We're Gonna Be All Right. She was Mad City. Okay.
Dre was indifferent. He said, I just need to hear him. I called Fatima after we left Dre's. I said, screw it. I'm doing both.
What did Dave and Kendrick want to do?
They asked us. Now, I must say that Dave Free and Kendrick said, what do y'all think based off of me and Fatima's experience at the Super Bowl and Dre as well? I got to be honest and say, Dre looked to me and Fatima and me having had done the last 2 Super Bowls, like, yo, what works in that space, not only in the room. And that was a big thing for me to tell Dre, like, yeah, I know you wanted bumping in the room and these people to be on their feet, but like it's 80 million people watching. You know what I'm saying? So, and so I was able to present Kendrick and Dre and Dave with a combination of me and Fatima's idea. Fatima was big on Mad City because of the location of where we were, period.
Right. Yeah.
If Pyrus and Crips all got along, you know what I'm saying? Like that statement alone, she had to explain to me, being an East Coast boy, that don't happen where we are. You know what I'm saying? Just in life. Let's take the music out of it. Let's take all of that. The location of where we are, though, that the phrase of Mad City hook just means so much.
Right.
You know what I'm saying?
And really connects with the set, right? And and let's talk about that for a second, because when it comes to the set, it wasn't just this structure that the guys were standing on and performing on and within these rooms, but it's what they represented. And for Dre and Snoop, it represented like landmarks from their lives and their careers, right? So there's in LA and Compton and Long Beach, right? So so there was like the LA County Courthouse, there was Tam's Burger, there was the club for that, and there was the nail salon. So it was all representative, and Snoop's house, right? And it was all representative of various places that, were important to these guys. But then it was on top of a map of the city of Los Angeles. Right?
Los Angeles.
They covered the entire football field with a giant map of the city of LA, which had millions of LED lights stitched into it, right? So that it would look like if you were pulling up and you were on an airplane going up into the sky looking down at the city. And that's what it was supposed to look like. And it did.
And it did. And Kendrick was standing in Compton.
So that's why I get what Fatima was saying. It connected to that texture, environment, and the level of gravitas that moment had.
Absolutely. It was a moment. And I felt like we were able to combine those 2 records, get the point across of Mad City, make that statement, but also party a little bit with We Gonna Be All Right. And again, with the similar to Mary for me, Kendrick's live performance is a whole nother thing than what you just hit on the radio or on your phone or whatever. You know what I mean? Like him performing We Gonna Be All Right and you listening to it, it's a whole different energy. So because I knew that, I was like, yo, trust me, this record is gonna come off. And we didn't have a lot of time. So like what was a very impactful verse and song that, the masses. Kendrick was the new guy there, even though he's arguably could be considered one of the greatest of all times in his young career.
Yeah,
right?
and he's by this point he's 4 albums deep or whatever it is. He's a veteran, right? He's not the new guy anymore, but in that group he is.
In that group he is.
Yeah.
And so, he was very receptive to what he felt like. And he said, yo, I'm gonna tap into it a whole nother way live. And he definitely did that. And so the throw to Eminem for me, people don't know this either. Here's another nugget real quick, exclusive
on the Paul Pod.
He freestyled that transition. I made the transition. He kept telling me for a month and a half, no, I got you. I said, yo, I just want to know what you're going to say.
Right.
Like,
and in rehearsal, it was gibberish.
It was mumbles.
Yeah.
It was mumbles. We did not hear what he was going to say until the Super Bowl.
Do you think he had it all along, or do you think he created it on the spot, or something in between?
I think it's something in between, Paul. I definitely don't think he had it all along. I think in that moment, he wanted to see where the energy was.
Right.
People want to see what Eminem is going to do.
Yeah.
People want to see and hear what Eminem is going to say, how he's going to say it, what he's going to bring. And so those couple rehearsals prior to that Super Bowl, I think Kendrick was like, yo, whatever I say to toss to him, it gotta be right. So that boy said, 35 summers, you think you forgot about Dre? Huh? I was like, oh my God. And then the boy came and said, nowadays everybody want to talk.
Yeah. He served it up. He served it up to him.
He served it so good, man. I was like, that is just a genius creative right there, where he's like, I know what's about to happen. Y'all don't know what's about to happen, but watch how I'll give you this appetizer real quick.
Yeah. Well, listen, only somebody with the talent level of a guy like Kendrick could do something like that, for sure.
Oh, yeah.
So
I never asked you this.
Yeah.
What was it like getting the call to do the Super Bowl from an M perspective, knowing that these other artists were also going to be on it? Because people may not know this, but our guy has a tendency to be a little nervous.
Well, listen, I think anybody who's performing on that stage has a tendency to be a little nervous, right? But I think that, I'll break it down for you a little bit. So I had known, like I said, that there was a possibility that Dre was going to be doing the Super Bowl for a couple years. They were talking about it. And the summer before the Super Bowl, so that was summer of 21, right? Mm-hmm. We'd spent some time in Los Angeles with Marshall. And he was at Dre's house. They were filming the documentary interviews for the DOC documentary, right? Okay. So if anybody hasn't seen that yet, it's an incredible documentary. But during those conversations, it's when it started to get serious. And this was like July.
Okay.
Right? So Dre came to Marshall, and I don't know if he had really talked to him about it prior to this or not. And he said, what do you think about me doing the Super Bowl? And Marshall was like, I mean, I don't know. Do you think you should do it? Because if you want to do it, you should do it. And he's like, well, if I'm doing it, you're doing it. And he's like, oh, yeah, I don't know. Right?
Yeah.
So it basically boiled down to like, Marshall's never going to really say no to Dre. If Dre needs him, he's going to be there. Right? Yep. And vice versa. So Dre decided it was the right thing for him. And he came to Marshall and said, hey, I'm doing this. You're with me, right? And Marshall was like, well, of course I'm with you. I'm not going to say no to Dre. Did he want to do the Super Bowl?
Oh, exclusive.
You're going to have to ask him. But I will say there was apprehension, not because he didn't necessarily want to perform, but because in recent times, people have been severely criticized for their Super Bowl performances, right?
For sure.
So if there was any apprehension, it was based upon the treatment of others and how he didn't want him and his friends to get treated, right?
I understood.
That's where the apprehension came from, if there was any, was from that, because he didn't want to put himself and his friends into a place where they could be subject to that level of scrutiny. Now, that being said, somebody like Jimmy Iovine heard that, right, and said, you are out of your mind. This is you. This is Dre. This is 50. This is Kendrick. This is Mary. This is Snoop. What are you talking about? You guys are superheroes. People are going to lose their fucking minds. Nobody's going to say a bad word. And he was right. So, you look at both sides of that.
Now, what I say about that, you about to say what I'm about to say. Go ahead.
No, you can look at both sides of that, right? Because there is one side to it where it has happened to people who, are considered to be superheroes, right? But I think that what Jimmy was saying was, it's not just one of you, it's all of you together. This is the Avengers. So even if Hulk has a bad fight, Iron Man's coming in and kicking some ass. Right. So it was about that. It was about strength in numbers and the level of stardom and power and those songs. Those songs, my God.
And so that's what I was going to say, man. Like if somebody like Jimmy says, what are you talking about? What are you talking about? But then it's the execution that nobody can talk about. You understand what I'm saying?
Of course. But Jimmy expects that level of execution because he's seen it and he's used to it. And he knows what they're capable of.
Yeah.
So him knowing what they're capable of, knowing the kind of people that are involved, knowing what they've done leading up to it, he was confident.
Yeah. That's dope. Well, I was honored to get the call.
Get the call. Listen, like I said, the unsung heroes, the glue, but you're about to be sung as a hero because the Emmys are coming up, right? So Adam and the whole team are up for Emmys. And, the interesting part about that is, there's something called an EGOT, right? And an EGOT is somebody who has won an Emmy, a Grammy, an Oscar, and a Tony, right? Which are the big categories of awards in entertainment. Now, Marshall has won multiple Grammys. He's won an Oscar for Lose Yourself. So I was like, he's always just going to be an egg. He's not going to be an EGOT, right? So, but now he gets not an egg. He's going to be a go, a Grammy and an Oscar. Right. He's always going to be a go. So he's never going to be an EGOT. But then it didn't even dawn on me that this performance could be up for an Emmy. And then the nominations come in, and I was like, oh wow, he might actually be an ego.
He's an ego. And
how do we get to the T? Time will tell.
It's easy. We'll offline about that.
Okay, we can powwow about that.
Very easy, very easy. We're gonna start to produce any of those stories that mean something to us and on Broadway and make it happen. And it don't have to be hip hop. It just got to be something super heartfelt that we just we believe in. So let's talk about it. We'll talk about that.
Okay, we definitely will.
Because I'm very proud of John Legend. I'm very proud of Jennifer Hudson, which is the latest. Like those people on the Tony side specifically, right? Paul is like find projects that they believe in, startups that are headed to Broadway or headed to the theaters, and it's like, I want to back this, I want to produce this, and Marshall being a producer as well, which I hope many people know that, but that boy is crazy on the production side. And that doesn't just mean beats, but I mean it's a creative thing as well. That's what we're going to do to get that T soon. Let's get this E first, but then we're going to get that T.
So tell me about that real quick before we close out. The Emmys are coming up.
Yes.
Have you been nominated for an Emmy before?
This is my third Emmy nomination.
Okay.
I am 0 for 2.
Okay.
I'm feeling real good about this one. I'm trying not to get myself too hyped up.
I'm feeling good about it too. It's hard to, I don't even know who the other nominees are. And
so
I'm going to say.
Tony Bennett beat me on my first one, and he's nominated again against me.
Uh-oh.
So,
that's a tough one to go up against.
I love Tony Bennett. Tony and Gaga have their thing. The Kennedy Center Honors is another incredible, live series special that happened, especially through COVID.
So you think that's your main competitor?
Tony Bennett?
Yeah, in this instance.
And listen, I didn't even tell you, the last one is the special of SNL that happened through COVID too.
Okay. Yeah, that's a tough one too. That's a tough one too.
So I everybody in their own right are all winners. what I will say, and this might not be the right thing to say, but damn it, I'm with Paul, so it's all good. But like, I don't know that everybody saw those other events. I know
you can
ours
be
was
damn
the most
sure
viewed.
They saw the Super Bowl halftime performance. You can
And that's
be
no
damn
shade
sure.
to anybody.
Yep.
That's no diss to anybody's show,
That's
because I'm
100%
sure they're
true.
all great. But if we're talking about eyes on our prize, we put our foot in their ass for those 13 minutes.
It was a level of greatness, and honestly, it was virtually perfect. It really was. Like I
felt
said
so good
a long
about
time
it,
ago,
man.
it was so well rehearsed that the execution was virtually flawless. And
yeah,
you know, we owe a lot of that to you, my friend.
I appreciate you, man. You know I got your back. I got Marshall's back, the whole Shady family.
We know.
Aftermath.
And when we get Marshall back out on the road one day, look for Adam Blackstone. In the meantime, you can check him out in the commercials for Nationwide.
Nationwide is on your side.
Yeah. So they're the Jill Scott commercials, right?
That's
and
right.
There's
that's right.
if you look closely, if you blink, you might miss him. You'll see Adam gently stroking his bass guitar, right?
That's right. That's right.
And that's
shout out to Jill Scott as well, man.
Yeah, that's more Philly connection. These guys in Philly, I know we've got music in Detroit, but Philly, they have the music in them as well. That's the Motown Philly connection, my friend, and it continues here in 2022 with Adam Blackstone and Eminem on the Paul Pod. Ladies and gentlemen, thanks for tuning in. Next time we have the man himself, Eminem, Adam Blackstone. Thank you.
Thank you for having me,
You've been the greatest, my friend. Until next time.
You gotta be fucking kidding me.